The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Pendleton as Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez finished her third cup of coffee. She had been training recruits for 8 years, and today felt like any other day until the sky began to change. What started as a clear blue California morning suddenly shifted to an unnatural purple hue, and strange lights began dancing across the heavens. "Sergeant, you seeing this?" called out Private Johnson, pointing upward with a shaking finger. Before Vasquez could respond, massive ships materialized in the atmosphere. They were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them. The ships were enormous, each one easily the size of a city, and there were dozens of them hanging in the sky like deadly ornaments. The base's emergency sirens began wailing, and Vasquez's training kicked in immediately. "All personnel, battle stations." "This is not a drill," she shouted, her voice carrying across the training grounds. Admiral Zekthara stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominator, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he gazed down at the primitive world below. His species, the Veltar, had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Earth would be number 48, and like all the others, it would fall within hours. "Status report," Zekthara commanded in his native language, his voice a deep rumble that resonated through his chest plates. "All fleets in position, Admiral," replied his second-in-command, Commander Vorax. "Initial scans show the planet's military forces are scattered and weak. Their most advanced weapons appear to be chemical-based projectiles and primitive explosive devices." Zekthara's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. "Pathetic. Begin the standard intimidation protocol. Broadcast our demands for immediate surrender." The transmission that reached every radio, television, and communication device on Earth was clear and terrifying. The alien voice spoke in perfect English, though with a mechanical undertone that made every word sound like a threat. "Primitive species of the third planet, you have been marked for extermination by the Galactic Hegemony. Your world contains resources needed for the expansion of superior civilizations. You have 1 standard galactic hour to surrender unconditionally. Any resistance will result in the complete annihilation of your species. This is your only warning." At the Pentagon, General Harrison slammed his fist on the conference table. "How long until our forces can mobilize?" "Sir, we've got Marine units ready to deploy immediately," replied Colonel Davis. "Air Force is scrambling everything they've got, and Navy's moving carriers into position." "What about these aliens? What do we know about them?" The intelligence officer looked grim. "Based on preliminary analysis of their ships, their technology is centuries ahead of ours. But, sir, they haven't attacked yet. They're giving us time to surrender." General Harrison stood up, his jaw set in determination. "Then they don't understand humans very well, do they? Give me every Marine commander we have. If these aliens want to fight, they picked the wrong species." Back at Camp Pendleton, Vasquez was organizing her Marines when the first alien transports began descending. These smaller craft were still massive by human standards, each one the size of a football stadium. They landed in open areas around major military installations, and from each one emerged an army of alien warriors. The Veltar soldiers were impressive creatures, standing 8 feet tall, with thick chitinous armor that grew naturally from their bodies. They carried weapons that hummed with energy, and their movements were precise and coordinated. They had never lost a ground battle. "Remember your training," Vasquez told her Marines as they took defensive positions. "These things bleed, which means they can die. Stay low, stay smart, and make every shot count." The first wave of alien soldiers advanced with mechanical precision. Their energy weapons fired beams of superheated plasma that could melt through steel, and their tactical formations were flawless. According to every military simulation the Galactic Hegemony had run, human resistance should have collapsed within minutes. But the Veltar had never faced Marines. The first alien to round the corner near the armory found himself staring down the barrel of Vasquez's M4 rifle. She squeezed the trigger 3 times in rapid succession, and the creature's natural armor cracked under the impact of the high-velocity rounds. Green blood splattered the ground as the alien fell. "Contact! They're not invincible!" she shouted over the radio. What followed was unlike anything the Veltar had experienced in their centuries of conquest. Human soldiers didn't fight with the cold precision of machines or the ritualistic honor codes of other species they had encountered. They fought with creativity, adaptability, and a ferocious determination that caught the aliens completely off guard. Private Rodriguez used his knowledge of urban warfare to turn a simple maintenance tunnel into a kill zone, picking off aliens one by one as they tried to advance through what they thought was a safe route. Corporal Thompson improvised explosives using materials from the base's engineering workshop, turning alien transports into twisted metal graveyards. But it was the Marines' ability to adapt and overcome that truly shocked the invaders. When the aliens' energy weapons proved ineffective against hastily constructed barriers made from vehicle armor and concrete, the Marines learned to use the aliens' own tactical precision against them. They would create deliberate weak points in their defenses, luring the aliens into carefully prepared ambushes. Admiral Zekthara watched the battle reports with growing disbelief. "How many ground units have we lost?" 12% casualty rate in the first engagement, sir, Commander Vorax reported, his voice betraying his own shock. "The humans are not responding as predicted." 12%. Zekthara's voice rose to a roar. "We expected 90% human casualties in the first hour. What are these creatures doing?" The answer came in the form of a transmission from one of their ground commanders. The alien's voice was strained with panic as he reported his situation. "Command, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They don't retreat when outnumbered. They don't surrender when their position is hopeless. And their warriors, they seem to actually become more dangerous when facing impossible odds." This last point was demonstrated perfectly by the actions of Gunnery Sergeant Williams. When his position was overrun by 20 alien soldiers, instead of retreating or surrendering, he grabbed 2 grenades and charged directly into the enemy formation. The resulting explosion took out half the alien squad and allowed his Marines to counterattack and retake the position. The battle raged for 6 hours, far longer than any engagement in the galactic hegemony's history of conquest. Worse still, the humans were learning. Each alien tactic was quickly countered. Each energy weapon was studied and adapted to. When a Veltar tried to use their superior technology to jam human communications, the Marines simply reverted to hand signals and field expedient methods that were impossible to interfere with. Corporal Jackson demonstrated this adaptability when he realized that the aliens' energy shields were designed to deflect energy-based attacks. Instead of trying to overwhelm the shields, he used his combat knife to get in close, where the shields couldn't function effectively. The sight of a human warrior defeating a technologically superior alien with a simple blade sent shockwaves through the Veltar ranks. As the first day of fighting came to an end, Admiral Zekthara faced an unprecedented situation. Not only had the humans failed to surrender, they had actually pushed back the initial invasion force in several locations. More troubling still, intercepted human communications suggested they were already developing countermeasures against Veltar technology. "Sir, we're receiving reports from other landing sites," Commander Vorax said, his voice carefully controlled. "The pattern is consistent across all engagement zones. Human resistance is not only holding, it's adapting and improving." Zekthara stared at the tactical display, showing the positions of his forces. Red indicators marked areas where his troops had been pushed back or eliminated entirely. In 47 previous conquests, this display had never shown anything but steady alien advancement. What makes these creatures so different, he wondered aloud. The answer was being demonstrated at that very moment in a bunker beneath Camp Pendleton, where Vasquez was debriefing her Marines. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, morale was surprisingly high. "What did we learn today?" she asked her exhausted but determined warriors. "Their armor's tough, but it's not perfect," replied Private Johnson. Hit them in the joints, and they go down just like anything else. Their weapons are powerful, but they overheat, added Corporal Martinez. If you can make them miss their first few shots, they have to pause to let their guns cool down. And they don't expect us to fight dirty, concluded Private Davis with a grin. When Rodriguez popped up out of that storm drain behind them, they completely lost their formation. Vasquez nodded approvingly. That's right. They're used to fighting enemies that think like they do. But Marines don't think like anyone else. We adapt, we overcome, and we never give up. What the Veltar didn't understand was that they had encountered something unique in their galaxy-spanning empire, a species that had evolved through constant warfare among themselves. Humans had spent millennia fighting each other across every possible terrain and condition, creating warriors who could adapt to any situation and turn any disadvantage into an opportunity. The Marines weren't just defending their base. They were learning their enemy's weaknesses and preparing for the next phase of the battle. Radio communications buzzed with requests for specific ammunition types, improvised weapon designs, and tactical innovations that were being shared between units in real time. As night fell over the battlefield, both sides prepared for the next day's fighting. But while the aliens were trying to understand what had gone wrong with their invasion, the humans were already planning how to take the fight to their enemies. The Galactic Hegemony had expected to add another easy conquest to their list. Instead, they had awakened something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare, courage, and the price of underestimating the human spirit. In her final radio report of the day, Staff Sergeant Vasquez summarized the situation in terms that would have made sense to Marines throughout history. Enemy is numerous and well-equipped, but they're not Marines. We'll hold the line and give better than we get. Semper Fi. Unknown to both sides, this first day of fighting had set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. The Veltar had brought their most advanced weapons and tactics to Earth, expecting a swift victory. Instead, they had given humanity a crash course in alien technology and a clear demonstration that their enemies, while powerful, were not invincible. The real war was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the first alien landing, and the war had spread across the globe. What the Galactic Hegemony had planned as a quick extermination had turned into the most brutal campaign in their military history. Admiral Zekthara stood before the Hegemony War Council, his forearms trembling slightly as he delivered his report via quantum communicator. Council members, the human resistance continues to exceed all projections, he began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. They have adapted to our technology faster than any species we have previously encountered. Supreme Commander Vexhan, the head of the Hegemony's military forces, leaned forward on the communication screen. His massive form, even larger than the already imposing Veltar, cast an ominous shadow. Explain how a primitive species with chemical weapons is causing our forces such difficulty. It is not their weapons that concern us, Supreme Commander. It is their tactics and their psychology. They fight with a level of intensity and creativity that our combat doctrine has never accounted for. Back on Earth, the intensity Zekthara referred to was being demonstrated at Marine Forward Operating Base Alpha, hastily constructed in the ruins of what had once been downtown San Diego. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the highest-ranking Marine officer still in contact with command, was reviewing battle reports from across the theater. "What's the status on Operation Leatherneck?" she asked her operations officer. "Ma'am, Bravo Company has successfully eliminated 3 alien-supplied depots using captured energy weapons," replied Major Peterson. "Charlie Company has established ambush positions along the aliens' primary advance route, and Delta Company has managed to capture an intact alien communications device." Colonel Michel nodded grimly. The past 3 weeks have been a crash course in asymmetric warfare on a scale never before imagined. The Marines had quickly learned that fighting the aliens required abandoning conventional military doctrine in favor of tactics that emphasized mobility, adaptability, and unconventional thinking. The breakthrough had come when Gunnery Sergeant Rivera discovered that alien energy weapons could be modified using simple electronic components salvaged from human devices. The first successful modification had been crude, essentially jury-rigging a car battery to an alien rifle. But it worked. More importantly, it showed that the aliens' technology, while advanced, was not magic. "Sir, we've got incoming communications from other Marine units worldwide," reported the communications officer. "It sounds like the modifications are working everywhere. Units in Japan report successful attacks on alien positions using modified energy weapons. European forces have managed to bring down 2 alien aircraft using improvised electromagnetic pulse devices." What the aliens didn't understand was that Marines were trained to be creative problem solvers. Every Marine, regardless of their specialty, was taught to think tactically and to find ways to complete their mission even when everything went wrong. This training was now being applied to alien technology with devastating effect. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, now leading a combined unit of Marines and civilian volunteers, had become something of a legend among the human resistance. Her team had been responsible for destroying more alien equipment than any other single unit, and their tactics were being copied by resistance fighters worldwide. "All right, listen up," Vasquez addressed her mixed group of Marines and civilians in the ruins of shopping mall that now served as their base. "Intelligence reports indicate the aliens are bringing in heavier reinforcements. That means bigger guns and stronger armor, but it also means they're getting desperate." Dr. Emily Chun, a physicist who had joined Vasquez's unit after her research facility was destroyed, raised her hand. "Sergeant, I've been studying the alien technology we've captured. I think I understand why our modifications are so effective. Explain it in terms a Marine can understand. Document. Their technology is incredibly sophisticated, but it's also incredibly specialized. Everything is designed to work perfectly under specific conditions against specific threats. They've never had to deal with someone taking their equipment apart and rebuilding it in ways they never intended." Private Williams, who had shown an unexpected talent for alien tech modification, grinned. "So you're saying they built a fancy sports car and we're turning it into a pickup truck?" "That's actually a perfect analogy," Dr. Chim replied. "Their energy weapons are designed for precision strikes against specific target types. But when you modify them with human electronics, you can make them do things like overload and explode or fire in burst patterns they were never designed for." This conversation was taking place just as Admiral Zekthara was receiving his most disturbing intelligence report yet. The Veltar had built their entire military doctrine around the concept of technological superiority. Their weapons, vehicles, and tactics were all based on overwhelming enemies with advanced technology that couldn't be countered or adapted to. But humans weren't trying to build better versions of alien technology. Instead, they were breaking it down and rebuilding it in ways that made no logical sense from an engineering perspective, but which somehow worked in practical application. "Admiral, we have confirmed reports of humans using our own energy weapons against us," reported Intelligence Officer Kreshta. "But these weapons have been modified in ways that our engineers say should be impossible." "Impossible how?" "They have combined our quantum energy matrices with their primitive electrical systems. According to our scientists, such combinations should result in catastrophic system failures. Instead, the humans have created weapons that are actually more effective than our original designs in certain situations." Zekthara's mandibles clicked in frustration. "How many of our troops have been lost to these modified weapons?" 15% of our ground forces, Admiral. But more concerning is that human morale appears to be increasing rather than decreasing. Our psychological warfare specialists report that human resistance is actually growing stronger as the conflict continues. This assessment was correct. What the aliens perceived as their main advantage, their technological superiority, was gradually being turned into a human advantage. Every piece of alien equipment captured or recovered from a battlefield became a learning opportunity for human engineers and scientists. Master Sergeant Jackson had established what he called Alien Tech University in an abandoned warehouse outside Los Angeles. Here, Marines with technical backgrounds worked alongside civilian scientists and engineers to reverse engineer alien technology and develop countermeasures. The key is not to try to understand how their stuff works, Jackson explained to a group of new arrivals. The key is to figure out how to make it work for us. These aliens think in straight lines, but Marines think in circles, zigzags, and sometimes upside down. The proof of this approach was evident in the weapons and equipment being produced by the makeshift facility. Alien energy weapons have been converted into everything from anti-aircraft guns to improvised explosives. Alien communication devices have been reprogrammed to jam alien sensors. Even alien armor plating was being used to create protective barriers for human positions. But the most significant development was the creation of hybrid weapons that combined human and alien technology in ways neither species had imagined. Private Rodriguez had created what he called the Alien Buster, an M4 rifle modified to fire alien energy bolts instead of conventional bullets. The weapon was crude and occasionally unreliable, but it could penetrate alien armor with ease. Rodriguez explained how this thing works, ordered Colonel Mitchell during her inspection of the facility. Well, ma'am, you take a standard M4 receiver and replace the bolt carrier group with modified alien energy components, Rodriguez explained enthusiastically. The alien power cell goes where the magazine would normally be, and the targeting system interfaces with our existing scope mounts. And it actually works? Yes, ma'am. Range is about the same as a regular rifle, but the stopping power is incredible. One shot will drop any alien trooper we've encountered so far. What Rodriguez didn't mention was that the weapon had a tendency to overheat and occasionally explode. But for Marines accustomed to equipment that didn't always work perfectly, this was just another operational challenge to overcome. The psychological impact of these hybrid weapons on alien forces was enormous. The Veltar had never encountered an enemy that could adapt their technology so quickly. Worse, the humans seemed to be improving on alien designs in ways that Veltar engineers couldn't understand or counter. Supreme Commander Vexhan reviewed the latest battle reports with growing alarm. Admiral Zekthara, your forces have been engaged with these humans for nearly a month. When will this resistance be eliminated? Supreme Commander, I request immediate reinforcements and authorization to use orbital bombardment, Zekthara replied desperately. The humans have proven more adaptable than any species we have previously encountered. Orbital bombardment? You want to destroy the very resources we came to claim? Sir, if we do not act decisively, we risk losing our entire expeditionary force. The humans are not just resisting, they are learning. Every day, they become more effective at countering our tactics and technology. This request represented something unprecedented in hegemony military history. Never before had a planetary conquest required orbital bombardment. The very fact that such extreme measures were being considered showed how completely the invasion had deviated from plan. On Earth, human forces were indeed learning, but they were also paying a terrible price. Cities have been reduced to rubble. Millions of civilians have been evacuated or were missing, and supply lines were constantly under threat. But instead of breaking human morale, these hardships seemed to strengthen their resolve. Staff Sergeant Vasquez surveyed the ruins of what had once been a thriving neighborhood. Her Marines were dug in among the debris, preparing for another alien assault. But there was something different about this preparation, an edge that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. You know what I figure out about these aliens? She said to Dr. Chun as they checked their modified weapons. They fight like they're playing a video game. Everything has to be perfect and predictable, or they don't know what to do. What do you mean? Marines learn to fight when everything goes wrong. When your equipment doesn't work, when you're outnumbered, when the plan falls apart 5 minutes after the shooting starts. These aliens have never had to deal with that. They expect their technology to solve every problem. As if to prove her point, the alien attack that afternoon followed the exact same pattern as previous assaults. Aerial reconnaissance, followed by artillery bombardment, followed by ground forces advancing in precise formations. It was textbook military doctrine executed flawlessly. But Vasquez's Marines were no longer fighting by any textbook. They had learned to use the aliens' predictability against them, setting traps and ambushes that turned the aliens' superior technology into a disadvantage. The battle that followed would later be studied in military academies as an example of how superior tactics could overcome superior technology. Using modified alien weapons and improvised explosives, a single Marine unit managed to destroy an entire alien assault battalion. As the day ended and the surviving alien forces retreated, Admiral Zekthara faced the unthinkable reality that his invasion force was not just failing to advance, it was actually losing ground. For the first time in Galactic Hegemony history, a conquest was not just being delayed, but potentially reversed. The humans had transformed from victims into predators, and they were getting better at it every day. The real question was no longer whether Earth would fall, but whether the Galactic Hegemony could survive its first military defeat. 2 months after the first alien ships appeared in Earth's skies, the war had reached a turning point that no one in the Galactic Hegemony could have predicted. What began as a routine extermination mission had become a nightmare that threatened the very foundation of their empire. Admiral Zekthara stood in his command center, staring at a tactical display that showed something impossible. For the first time in the hegemony's 3-century history of expansion, their forces were not advancing. They were retreating. "Sir, we have confirmed reports of human forces launching offensive operations against our defensive positions," reported Commander Vorax, his voice barely concealing his disbelief. "They're using our own technology against us with increasing effectiveness." The humans had indeed gone on the offensive. Led by a newly promoted Colonel Vasquez, combined Marine and civilian resistance forces had begun systematically targeting alien supply lines, command centers, and isolated outposts. What made these attacks so devastating was not just their tactical precision, but the complete unpredictability of human strategy. "Status report from all theaters," Zekthara demanded. North American theater reports 60% casualties among ground forces. European theater reports complete loss of 3 forward operating bases. Asian theater. Vorax paused, struggling with the words. Asian theater reports that human forces have captured 2 of our heavy assault vehicles and are using them against us. This last report referred to an operation carried out by a joint Marine-civilian team led by Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez and Dr. Emily Chun. They had developed a technique for disabling alien vehicles without destroying them, allowing human forces to capture and repurpose advanced alien technology. "How did you figure out how to drive these things?" Colonel Vasquez asked Rodriguez as she inspected the captured alien assault vehicle, a massive machine that looked like a cross between a tank and a spaceship. "Turns out their control systems are designed for creatures with 4 arms, but if you ignore half the controls and just focus on the basic movement and weapons systems, it's not that different from driving a really complicated truck," Rodriguez replied with a grin. Dr. Chun here figured out how to interface human electronics with their targeting computer. Dr. Chun nodded enthusiastically. "The breakthrough came when we realized that their systems are designed to be operated by a single species. They never considered the possibility of multi-species crews or improvised control systems. Once we stopped trying to use their technology the way they intended and started adapting it to human capabilities, everything became much easier. This adaptability had become the defining characteristic of human resistance. While the Veltar continued to fight according to their established military doctrine, humans had essentially created an entirely new form of warfare that combined conventional tactics with captured alien technology and improvised strategies. Master Sergeant Jackson, now running 3 different alien tech universities across the country, had developed what he called the Marine Modification Manual, a constantly updated guide for converting alien equipment to human use. The manual had grown from a few pages of handwritten notes to a comprehensive technical database that was being distributed to resistance cells worldwide. The thing about alien technology, Jackson explained to a new group of Marine engineers, is that it's designed by aliens for aliens. But Marines aren't aliens, and Marines don't follow alien rules. So we take their perfect technology and we make it perfectly useful for us. The results of this philosophy were visible everywhere human forces operated. Alien energy weapons had been converted into power sources for human equipment. Alien communication systems have been reprogrammed to jam alien sensors across wide areas. Alien armor plating was being used to create improvised vehicles that could withstand alien weapons fire. But perhaps the most significant development was the creation of what humans called hybrid doctrine, military tactics that combined human creativity with alien technology in ways that neither species had ever imagined. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, formerly a logistics specialist who had become an expert in alien technology integration, demonstrated this hybrid approach during a briefing for Marine commanders. Traditional military doctrine says you establish secure supply lines, maintain communication with command, and advance according to predetermined objectives, she explained, pointing to a tactical map. Alien doctrine is similar, but more rigid. They require constant communication with higher command and detailed planning for every contingency. So what do we do differently? Asked Major Chun. We operate in small, independent units that can adapt to changing circumstances without requiring approval from higher command. We use alien technology to enhance our capabilities, but we don't depend on it. And most importantly, we make decisions that no alien computer program or tactical doctrine would ever predict. This last point was being demonstrated at that very moment by a Marine unit operating behind alien lines. Led by Sergeant First Class Williams, the team had been tasked with disrupting alien communications in their sector. Instead of attempting a direct assault on the heavily defended alien communication facility, Williams had come up with a solution that perfectly exemplified human tactical thinking. "Sir, I've been studying these alien communication systems," Williams reported to Colonel Vasquez via captured alien radio. "I think I know how to shut down their entire network without firing a shot." Explain. Their communication system is designed to be completely secure and unhackable. It uses quantum encryption and multiple redundant pathways. But it's also designed to automatically adapt to interference by increasing signal strength and switching frequencies. And, well, Doc Shin gave me this idea about feedback loops. What if we don't try to hack their system or destroy it? What if we just make it think it's being interfered with when it's not? Williams's plan was elegantly simple. Using modified alien communication equipment, his team broadcast a series of false interference signals that mimicked the kind of electronic warfare the aliens expected from a more advanced enemy. The alien communication system responded exactly as designed, automatically increasing power and switching frequencies to compensate for the false interference. The result was a cascade failure that shut down alien communications across an area covering 3 states. For 12 hours, alien ground forces were operating blind and deaf, unable to coordinate their activities or call for support. During those 12 hours, human forces launched coordinated attacks across the entire theater. Marine units that had been pinned down for weeks suddenly found themselves facing confused and isolated alien forces. Resistance cells that had been hiding in urban ruins emerged to attack supply convoys that could no longer call for help. The psychological impact on alien forces was devastating. The Veltar had built their military doctrine around the assumption that their technology was inherently superior to anything their enemies could produce. The idea that humans could turn their own systems against them was simply incomprehensible. Supreme Commander Vexhan reviewed the latest reports from Earth with growing horror. Admiral Zekthara explained to me how an entire theater command network can be compromised by primitive chemical weapons technology. Supreme Commander, the humans are not using chemical weapons to attack our systems, Zekthara replied carefully. They're using our own technology, but They're using it in ways our engineers say should be impossible. Impossible how? They have modified our quantum communication arrays to generate false interference patterns that our systems interpret as evidence of advanced electronic warfare. Our networks respond by implementing enhanced security protocols, which creates a feedback loop that eventually causes system-wide failures. And our engineers did not anticipate this possibility? Sir, our engineers designed the system to respond to sophisticated electronic warfare from technologically advanced enemies. They never considered the possibility of primitive forces using our own equipment to generate false signals that would trigger our automated defense protocols. This exchange perfectly illustrated the fundamental problem facing the galactic hegemony. Their military doctrine was based on fighting enemies who thought and acted like they did. Humans, however, approached warfare from a completely different perspective. Dr. Emily Chun had become something of a celebrity among human resistance forces for her ability to understand and explain alien technology. Her insights have been crucial to the development of hybrid weapons and tactics that were now being used successfully across the globe. The key to understanding alien technology, she explained during a broadcast to resistance cells worldwide, is to remember that they think in terms of perfection and predictability. Every system is designed to work flawlessly under specific conditions. But Marines don't operate under perfect conditions. They operate under impossible conditions and make them work anyway. What Dr. Chun is saying, added Colonel Vasquez, who was sharing the broadcast, is that these aliens have never had to deal with Murphy's Law. They've never had to fight when everything goes wrong, when your equipment doesn't work, when your plan falls apart, and when the only thing standing between you and defeat is your ability to adapt and overcome. This broadcast was being monitored by Veltar intelligence, and the alien analysts were struggling to understand what they were hearing. The concept of deliberately operating under suboptimal conditions was foreign to their military philosophy. They seemed to be suggesting that inferior conditions can somehow lead to superior results, reported intelligence analyst Thekvar. This contradicts fundamental principles of military science. But those fundamental principles were being challenged daily by human actions that achieved impossible results through methods that made no logical sense. When alien reinforcements arrived to retake a captured supply depot, they found that humans had converted the alien equipment into an improvised weapons factory that was producing modified energy weapons faster than the aliens could destroy them. When alien aircraft attempted to provide close air support for ground operations, they discovered that humans had modified captured anti-aircraft systems to fire in coordinated volleys that created overlapping fields of destruction no single aircraft could survive. Most disturbing of all, intercepted human communications suggested that they were already developing countermeasures for alien technology that hadn't even been deployed yet. Human scientists were apparently studying captured equipment to predict what other capabilities alien forces might possess, and they were preparing defenses against theoretical threats. How are they anticipating our tactical responses? Demanded Admiral Zekthara during an emergency command conference. Sir, their scientists appear to be reverse engineering our equipment, not just to understand how it works, but to predict what other equipment we might have based on the technological principles they observe, explained his chief intelligence officer. They are essentially developing a comprehensive understanding of our technological capabilities from limited samples. This assessment was accurate. Human scientists and engineers working with captured alien technology had begun to understand the basic principles underlying Veltar science. More importantly, they had begun to understand the logical thought processes that guided alien engineering and tactical decision-making. These aliens are incredibly smart, but they're also incredibly predictable, Dr. Chun explained to a gathering of Marine commanders and civilian scientists. Once you understand their basic approach to problem solving, you can predict how they'll respond to new situations. Give us an example, requested General Harrison, who had arrived to personally assess the situation. Their energy weapons are designed to maximize efficiency while minimizing collateral damage. That's why they use focused beams rather than explosive projectiles. But that also means they're not effective against distributed targets or heavily shielded positions. If we can force them to engage us in environments where their precision weapons are less effective, we gain a significant tactical advantage. And their vehicles? Optimized for performance over ruggedness. They're fast, maneuverable, and heavily armed, but they're not designed to operate in damaged terrain or to function when their systems are compromised. A human Humvee with a flat tire can still complete its mission. An alien assault vehicle with a damaged navigation system becomes useless. These insights were being put to practical use across all theaters of operation. Human forces had learned to fight in ways that maximized alien disadvantages while minimizing their own technological shortcomings. The war's climax came when Admiral Zekthara received an ultimatum from Supreme Command: achieve complete victory within 10 standard days or face recall and court-martial for military incompetence. Faced with the complete destruction of his career and reputation, Zekthara made a desperate decision. Prepare all remaining forces for a final assault, he ordered. We will commit every ship, every soldier, and every weapon to a coordinated attack on all human military positions simultaneously. Either we will achieve total victory, or we will be destroyed in the attempt. But human intelligence, monitoring alien communications through captured equipment, learned of this plan within hours. What the aliens intended as a final, overwhelming assault became instead the perfect opportunity for humanity to demonstrate just how completely the balance of power had shifted. The battle that followed would later be remembered as the moment when Earth's defenders stopped being victims and became predators. Using every piece of modified alien technology, every improvised weapon, and every tactical innovation developed over 2 months of desperate fighting, human forces didn't just survive the alien assault. They destroyed it completely. When the smoke cleared, Admiral Zekthara found himself commanding a shattered fleet in orbit around a planet his forces no longer controlled. For the first time in galactic hegemony history, a conquest had not just failed, it had been reversed. The final irony came when human forces, using captured alien spacecraft and modified propulsion systems, launched their own ships into orbit. The hunters had become the hunted, and the primitive species that was supposed to be exterminated was instead preparing to take the war to the stars. Admiral, Commander Vorax reported with a voice filled with defeat. We are receiving a transmission from the human military command. The message was simple, delivered in perfect Veltar by Colonel Vasquez, who had learned the alien language from captured prisoners. Galactic hegemony forces, you came to our world expecting an easy conquest. You found Marines instead. We are no longer defending Earth. We are liberating the galaxy. Surrender now, or face the consequences of awakening humanity. As the human ships approached his fleet, Admiral Zekthara realized that the galactic hegemony had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had not encountered a primitive species suitable for extermination. They had encountered the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy, and they had given them advanced technology and a reason to fight. The age of human expansion was about to begin.